Hey everyone, and welcome to another Chris Bond 21 review, and today we're looking at Banjo-Tooie. So even before the success of Banjo-Kazooie, Rare immediately got to work on the follow-up, considering how they had a ton of ideas left over from the first game. Rare had the monumental task of a follow-up, since the first game had received such a positive reception. But Rare was in a good spot to craft the sequel, because they had abandoned a lot of features in Swap and Stop late into the development of the first game. They'd also cut several worlds and a multiplayer component. And in the end, they did end up creating a bigger and better sequel. The worlds are bigger, there's more moves, there's more secrets. It really is, from a certain perspective, a more ambitious title. And now this is the part where I pose a question, something like, does Banjo-Tooie live up to the success of the first game? And I leave you in suspense for the remaining 10 to 15 minutes as I break down the answer to that question. However, I have to cut right to the chase here and be honest when I say that I really don't care for this game. But before you scroll down to the comments and condemn me, let me say that I will elaborate and that this is my opinion, which I'm not enforcing onto anyone. If you love this game to death, that's fine with me. More power to you. But for me, it's just not my cup of tea. For what I feel that while Banjo-Tooie is a bigger and more ambitious sequel, I think it starts to cave under the weight of its changes in both design and execution. Well, let's get the story out of the way, since that's probably one of the few things in this game I take very little issue with. So after Gruntilda fell off her tower at the conclusion of the last game, Klungo tried hard to remove the boulder that trapped her. In fact, one attempt had Klungo trying to put Grunty's soul in a mech suit, which then kidnapped Kazooie, and then time traveled back to the past to stop the young Kazooie from ever meeting Banjo, which kind of renders the first part of that sentence kind of mute. But Banjo then traveled back in time and found the present-day Kazooie, but they never go back into the present to see what the present was like without them. But, okay, look, this was all in a very crappy GBA spin-off called Grunty's Revenge, which I'm sure like 70% of the fanbase tries really hard to pretend doesn't exist, and I never played. So, moving on. Regardless, Klungo's been at it for 2 years and is literally right where we left him. However, he isn't alone for long as a mechanical drill burrows its way into Spiral Mountain. Inside the drill are Grunty's two other sisters, Mingjella and Blobelda, who have come to rescue their sister. How they exactly knew that Grunty needed saving is left unanswered, but I assume Klungo must have called them at some point between games. Regardless, they use the spell to raise the boulder, and Grunty rises from her tomb to seek revenge. Though Grunty has clearly seen better days, as now she's all bones, yet somehow she still has normal legs despite having no midsection. While this is going on, Banjo, Kazooie, Bottles, and Mumbo are playing poker when the gang hears the noises outside, and so they send Mumbo out to investigate. Mumbo oversees all this and tries to head back to warn the group when Grunty spots him and promptly starts throwing spells his way to stop him in his tracks. Mumbo gets back just in the nick of time to warn the others, however Bottles, believing it all to be a joke, decides to stay put in the house as Banjo, Kazooie, and Mumbo leave. Grunty takes aim at Banjo's house and sends the mother of all spells directly at it, causing a huge explosion. Grunty escapes with her sisters, who leave their minions behind to destroy Spiral Mountain, and the next day Banjo, Kazooie, and Mumbo search the house, only to learn that Grunty has killed Bottles, and now the pair must set out on another quest to get their revenge on Grunty. Much like the last game, the plot kinda takes a back seat at this point. The only added developments are that Grunty and her sisters now have a plan of getting her original body back. Mingjella and Blobelda have created a giant machine back at their lair in Cauldron Keep called the B.O.B., the Big Old Blaster. A giant ray gun that can suck the life out of anything and then give it to something else. The sisters then test it on the Jinjo King, King Jingaling, turning him into a zombie, and then await to charge the gun up to full power to hit the entire island in order to give Grunty her body back. Other than that, it's pretty much business as usual. Banjo and Kazooie encounter a ton of new faces, and some familiar ones they make their way to Cauldron Keep. The first new character is Master Jiggy Wiggy, who will now help Banjo and Kazooie unlock paths to access the world. Taking over for Bottles due to his untimely demise is his brother Jam Jars, a drill sergeant who will help the pair learn new moves. Mumbo Jumbo gets in on the action this time he's playable, and you can use his magic to help you out in certain cases. Taking his spot, though, is Humba Wumba, a Native American woman who will now transform Banjo and Kazooie. Cheeto is hanging around Grunty's old lair, and you can now find 5 of his pages to get a cheat code. Honeybee will take your honeycomb pieces and trade you in for an extra life as well. And finally, there's Heggy, who ties into the swap and stop feature that was pulled from the first game's development. Heggy works 2 different ways depending on the version you're playing. Playing on the N64 version has you coming across these little BK game packs around the world that you can break, and these act as the mystery eggs from Stop and Swap. Though if you play the 360 arcade game first, and then you play this game, the eggs that you collected in the first game carry over. Regardless, Heggy is used to hatch these eggs and give you certain bonuses and rewards. The worlds this time are a tad less random and fall more in line with a more realistic order. The main hub this time is the Isle o' Hags, and the worlds are now areas within this hub, and they mostly tie into the other areas in which you find their entrances. This time you visit Mayhem Temple, a Native American vibe of temples and forest, Glitter Gulch Mine, a mine shaft which has a ton of hidden paths and secrets, Witchy World, Grunty's own amusement park which does not follow any type of safety codes, Jolly Roger's Lagoon, a seaside little pub with a massive underwater lake to explore, Pterodactyl Land, filled with dinosaurs and caveman fractions warring with each other, Grunty's Industry, which is hell, full on hell, I mean it, Grunty's personal factory seemingly where nothing is produced but pollution and aggravation, but more on that later. Hailfire Peaks, which fuses a fire and ice level together, crafting a pretty unique level. And finally, Cloud Cuckoo Land. No, not that Cloud Cuckoo Land from the Lego movie. That has a space, or a hyphen between it, so yeah, that makes it a different thing. And copyright's a thing, so there you go. It's just weird. I can't say much about this level, but I'll explain why in a bit. Traveling across the island, the pair reaches Cauldron Keep. Banjo and Kazooie head up the tower only to find themselves trapped inside of another game show that Gruntilda puts on. This time it's the Tower of Tragedy, which not only includes Banjo and Kazooie as contestants, but Grunty's sisters. Like the last game, you have to answer questions based on the journey, though this time you have to worry about Grunty's sisters beating you to the punch and answering first. The prize for winning all 3 rounds is not dying, since Grunty willingly lets her sisters get crushed to death by a giant weight after they lose each round. After the quiz, Banjo and Kazooie find the B.O.B. and use it to shoot back to life into King Jingaling and Bottles, bringing them both back to life. After saving their friends, it's final battle time as Banjo and Kazooie reach the top of the tower and confront Grunty, who's inside the drill machine. After a multi-phased fight, Grunty tries to hit the pair with another instant death spell that she hit Bottles with, only for Banjo and Kazooie to hit her first, causing her to drop it inside the drill, which then causes it to explode with her inside of it. Mumbo, Humba, Klungo, and King Jingaling await the pair back at Bottles' house to celebrate, only to have Banjo and Kazooie arrive and explain that Grunty isn't quite gone. Nope, now she's just a skull, and they begin tossing it around as Grunty swears revenge in Banjo 3. The fanbase sighs and cries internally, realizing what that game will really turn out to be. So overall, I'd say the story, while still basically simple in structure like the last one, does raise the stakes a lot more, which is something any good sequel should do. Also, I'm surprised at how dark the game can be at times. I mean, we legit open on Bottles dying. Then Jingaling here turns into an undead monster, and Grunty's sisters are literally crushed to death with giant weights. And it's not like that funny thing in a cartoon where, you know, they pop back later, like all smushed and stuff, and alright, we never see them again after that moment, so they dead, right? If anything, the story really subverts your expectations by taking away all of the familiar things you had at your disposal from the last game. Bottles is gone, Mumbo's no longer in charge of transforming you, Spiral Mountain is left in ruins, and hell, even if you enter Grunty's old lair, it's all wrecked and blocked with, like, boulders. You're left wondering in the opening beats of the story just how all this stuff will be fixed or resolved, and yeah, as you come across Jam Jars and Humba and explore the new hubs, you start putting all those pieces together about how it's gonna all work out. So again, the main plot of getting revenge on Grunty is par for the course. The darker elements of characters dying along with new characters keeps the story interesting. The good news is that Banjo and Kazooie are still extremely likable protagonists. Banjo is still just as good-hearted, if a bit dim at times, and Kazooie is still a loudmouth ready to insult anything and anyone that crosses their path. Also, the pair seems really fond of breaking the fourth wall this time, since they constantly make references to the fact that this is all a game, and that their last adventure was clearly a game too. Gameplay-wise, things are mostly the same. The goal is still to enter all the worlds, find the Jiggies, and use them to open up more worlds. I mentioned Master Jiggy Wiggy earlier as the one who helps with that. Gone are the picture portraits from Banjo-Kazooie, and in its place is the Temple of Jiggy Wiggy. Once you have enough Jiggies, the temple opens and Master Jiggy Wiggy will let you play a little mini-game where you must put puzzle pieces into a picture before the timer runs out to open the world. This element is actually based on a hidden mini-game from the first Banjo-Kazooie. If you went inside Banjo's house and looked up at the picture of Bottles, a similar mini-game played out. Once you're inside a world, you'll find yourself on the hunt for collectibles and Jiggies, much like the last time. So let's break down what's new for you to see and do in each world. First, the biggest change is how musical notes are handled. There's still 100 in each world, however they're no longer hidden around individually. Instead, you find baskets of 5 notes each and a giant clef note which contains 20, meaning that each world now has 16 baskets of the fibers and 1 giant clef. Unlike the first game, you must no longer worry about the note doors to get past. This time the notes are used to buy your moves. And that leads us to Jam Jars, who's now basically Bottles. He helps you out in each level, giving you new moves. And there's a ton of new moves such as ledge climbing, spring shoes, a ground pound drill move, holding Kazooie like a gun to engage in first person sections, which feels totally bizarre unless you know about Rare's history with like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. The biggest new move though is now that Banjo and Kazooie can split up from each other. This allows them to tackle different challenges and access different parts of each world. In addition to splitting Banjo and Kazooie up, they can also learn moves that are independent to them. Banjo gets a move where he can swing his backpack, or he can get inside it to prevent damage, which doesn't quite make sense, but let it slide. While Kazooie gets a glide ability and the ability to hatch eggs, in addition to now firing different types of eggs, such as a fire, ice, and even grenade type. There's also mini-games in each world to take part in. You might be playing Dodgeball in Mayhem Temple, or riding around a bumper car in Witchy World. The mini-games provide a nice little break from the platforming and exploring, and as a side feature they all can be replayed during the game's multiplayer mode. I'll skip to the end here with the multiplayer, that unfortunately I've never played the multiplayer mode, so I can't really comment too strongly on that. However, since I do know that some of the modes involve the mini-games from the campaign, I can say that I had fun with those, so I assume I would have enjoyed them alongside friends in place of the AI. Also helping the pair out are Mumbo and Humba Wumba. Since Mumbo is now playable, you get to control him to use different spells in each level. You must find the Mumbo pad in each level to get Mumbo to perform these spells, and I'll explain the issue I have with that in just a wee bit. Humba is now in charge of transforming Banjo and Kazooie into a variety of things to help them out. This time the duo can turn into a stone statue, a TNT pump, a van, Van kind of sounds lame when you think about it. Actually, come to think of it, that move wasn't that great. Submarine that shoots missiles, a T-Rex, a smaller version of the T-Rex, so that kind of counts twice, I guess. And the watching machine, which was actually a glitch from the first game. If you stepped on Mumbo's pad, he would accidentally turn you into one. You couldn't move around in it, but now it's playable. Snowball, and finally the B-form returns because I guess the developers were just like, dude, we came up with enough new stuff, let's just reuse something. And now while all this sounds great, like things are technically playing out pretty much like a carbon copy of the last game, that couldn't really be further from reality. The first issue is now that the levels are much bigger than they were in the first, and they're all interconnected, meaning that there are paths that you can start off in Witchy World that can take you to Glitter Gulch Mine, for instance. There's also a train that can travel between all the worlds as well, and you can use it to take things from one level to the next. Second, the moves you learn in one world are sometimes not all the moves you need to grab all the 10 Jiggies in the current world you're in. So unlike the last game, there's no 100% completing a world in one sitting, and that means backtracking. And I'm sure you're sitting there and your brain is slowly working out what might go wrong with such a system in place. And this is where I flat out got aggravated with Banjo-Tooie. Each level is a giant maze of paths and areas, and it's hard to sometimes remember where things are and how to get back there. Now there is a warp system that can get you to the general landmarks for most part, but there's never seemingly enough warp points leading to where you might need to go. It just sort of puts you in the ballpark. So each time I entered a world, I would just walk around trying to find all the notes, jam jars, and the warp pads, then tackle what Jiggies I could. I also hated that you needed moves from later in the game to grab Jiggies in the early levels. This might just be a me problem since I spent so long playing the first game and I got used to 100%ing completing everything in one sitting, but I spent almost an hour in each level with no Jiggies collected because I was basically surveying the level and trying to figure out what I could and couldn't do, along with trying to find jam jars to learn new moves. Seriously, look at how much time I spent in some of these worlds. These are my totals literally the first time going in. Trust me, I definitely recorded at least an hour of footage before I started grabbing Jiggies. A good example of this is when you enter the first world and you come across the prison compound and you meet Dilberta, who's trapped inside. On the side of this prison are 3 buttons to unlock the cell. The trick of finding the answer requires you to first gain access to the transformation spell for the world, and then you talk to one of the stone statues who basically gives you clues on what to press. After using that knowledge, the door swings open and you can free her, and had this game been, Banjo-Kazooie, you would have most likely obtained a Jiggy right then and there and moved on. But instead, after freeing her, she's going to tell you that she needs to get back to her partner who's in the next world, Glitter Gulch Mine. And sure enough, there's a boulder right next to her that conveniently blocks the way back. You'll try to beak bomb it, ground pound it, maybe even throw a grenade egg at it if you've gotten access to that yet, to no avail. Turns out you need to head to Glitter Gulch Mine itself, find jam jars, learn the new drill bill attack that breaks boulders. After that, you gotta hightail it back to Mayhem Temple and break the boulder, reuniting Dilberta and her partner, who then gives you the Jiggy. And this is just one of the simpler multi-step Jiggies, if you can believe it. One of the more time-consuming ones is encountered in the 4th level, Jolly Roger's Lagoon. At the starter level, there are some pigs that want to go swimming, but the water is polluted. So naturally, you can enter the pipe and investigate. You come across a switch that will make the water clean, but the pigs can't swim yet because the water's too warm. Now I know what you're thinking, Chris, pressing one button is too easy, there has to be something else. So recently you've obtained ice eggs from jam jars in this area, and now you might be thinking, well, they said it's not cold enough, it's too warm, so ice, you might start throwing some eggs in there. But that doesn't do anything. Nope, instead you have to wait till you get to the final level in Cloud Cuckoo Land and you find an ice cube named George, and then you have to toss him off a cliff which lands into the 7th world, Hailfire Peaks, and in that level you have to press a button to then make the water drain out and hit the friggin' pool down in Jolly Roger's Lagoon. And while we're talking about half-starter things to do in Jolly Roger's Lagoon, I have to mention hatching Tip Top's egg. So literally a stone throw away from where the pigs are having their own issue with the water, Tip Top here needs Kazooie to hatch his newborn son. Only guess what? Kazooie hasn't learned that yet and won't until the next level. So think about the first time you play this game. Like, try to put yourself into like a brand new player that's never known anything about this game. You're gonna most likely stumble across the pigs, right? And you'll help them and then hit a brick wall once you press that button and realize that you can't make the water any colder. Then you might walk across the other side of this little first area and you might stumble across Tip Top and then have no clue to proceed. Do you see how that might frustrate a new player? Especially someone who was like used to the first game, how simple it was to gain all the Jiggies. Then there's Grunty Industries, which is like the biggest WTF and the kick to the nads in terms of overall design. So at this point, you've probably just finished Pterodactyl Land, and probably didn't get more than half the Jiggies from that level, so you'll head off to Grunty's Industries. And once you get inside, you'll search around trying to get inside, only finding that there's nothing to do except for a button over here that can open the train gate. There's also going to be this battery over the entrance that you can stun, but the game doesn't tell you what it is or what you can do with it. After about 30 minutes here, I had to look up what the hell you have to do, and it seems like the most simplistic thing in the world that I just couldn't wrap my brain around. Turns out, the button for the train wasn't just to unlock the train for the level to do something else. No. You have to take the train now from another level to enter Grunty Industries. But at this point in the game, I was just only summoning the train from each station just so I could deliver something. It didn't really occur to me that I'd have to enter the physical world by taking the train. We never did that before, and ironically, it wasn't the first thing that popped into my head. Again, this is probably a me being stupid problem, but like, I wonder if I'm not alone on this. But then even once I was inside, it didn't get any better. A ton of the paths are blocked, and now you need to find the batteries that were outside in front of the place to open up some of the other areas, so you need to find them first. So now I'm spending half of the time here searching for batteries, and then trying to remember where I can place them, and then trying to figure out what I can interact with, and honest to God, I needed a map for this place, because it was driving me insane. And I'm beginning to think about like what you had to do to cheat in this place way back in the day, like before there was YouTube and like video like walkthroughs, like reading something I still think would have driven me up a wall. And this just became exhausting as the game went on, since I had to also contend with the fact that Mumbo and Humba are requirements to get some of these jiggies going. But before you can use them, you have to find a Globo, which is thankfully near their homes, but it still gets annoying because every level now has a Mumbo skull and a Humba wigwam. I liked it in the last game Mumbo wasn't in every level, as it made it easier to move around without wondering what was the one thing in the level that you needed transformation for. But now in each level you're going to have to take note of what needs Mumbo and what might need a transformation. And I'll just say it, Humba works as well as Mumbo did in the last game, while I hate Mumbo completely. First off, Mumbo has no moveset. He can only jump. And mind you, it's a small hop at best. He does have a little shock move that he can perform with his wand, which you'll hardly ever use because you have to stand still and hope that the enemies that are coming at you aren't moving, which they always are. Mumbo is a glorified padding mechanic in most levels, as his spell either open paths or areas that Banjo-Kazooie needs to go through to get to his Jiggy. But that's not even the worst of it. It's how you have to gain access to Mumbo in each level. After you find the Globo, you take it to Mumbo and skip through all the dialogue to get him to help. Then walk him to either the Mumbo pad or the warp pad to it, and then have him use it before having to go all the way back to his skull and put him in his seat to get control back of Banjo. And this is just the worst when you find another Mumbo pad that you didn't hit and didn't see, and now have to go all the way back to get him. And then some things with Mumbo are just needlessly drawn out to the point where you'll start pulling your hair out. For instance, in Pterodactyl Land, you have to use Mumbo to heal 2 sick dinosaurs, one of which you can use a Mumbo pad for that's right in the room, but the other one requires you to grab Banjo, using the carrying pack move and transport the dinosaur to the train, then take the train to the cliffside in the hub world and use that Mumbo to heal it and then bring it back. I mean, what the hell is the point? If there's a Mumbo pad already in the room, why can't Mumbo just do it? At this point, I felt like the developers were just looking at me and laughing, saying, haha, you want to get this Jiggy? Well, you're going to have to do this extra step just to drive you nuts. This really infected the enjoyment I got out of the rest of the game, since I would do something in a level and seemingly make progress for a bit, only to learn that I couldn't finish a mission, since I didn't have the right move, or something from another level was needed to trigger what I was working on in my current level. I understand Rare wanting to build a more connected world than what was seen in the last game. I get it, the worlds in Banjo-Kazooie are very isolated, they're very much on their own, you don't need to go back and forth between worlds except for that one Jiggy between Freezeezy Peak and Gobi's Valley, but it's just... there's too many Jiggies here that require backtracking and moving on in the hopes of finding the moves that you need to make any progress. I honestly hated going into a new world, because it meant trying multiple options until I happened to stumble across the one thing I could actually do. And in hindsight, this game is great, because you know exactly what to skip and avoid and focus on what needs to get done, but for a first-time player, someone who's brand new, or someone that really enjoyed Banjo-Kazooie, and is hoping that Banjo-Tooie is more of the same, this might give the wrong first impression, and might leave a sour taste in someone's mouth. There's a reason I've tried 4 times in the course of my life to play this game from start to finish, and each time I get a little bit further, but only just a tad. The first time I stopped was at Jolly Rogers, and the second and third time I stopped at around Pterodactyl Land, and on the fourth I got to Grunty's Industry, and I stopped there because if I'd gone any further, well, I wouldn't be here to tell you good people about this game right now, because I probably would have jumped out of a window. And for the purpose of this review, I did finish it, start to finish. Granted, I did have to pull out a guide, starting with Grunty's Industries, and now I can divulge in what I hinted about Cloud Cuckoo Land at the beginning, and that was the fact that I've never stepped foot in here. See, the number of Jiggies required to reach the final Grunty battle is only 70, out of the 90 that are in this game, which means that unlike the last game where only 94 Jiggies were needed and 6 could be skipped over, you now can skip a whopping 20. So once I snagged the 70 Jiggies, I never went to the final level, because frankly, I didn't care and I did not want to be bothered for an hour of trying to figure out what I could and couldn't do. There's still moves to learn in the last level, and I know while it's the last level there can't really be too many ways to screw up and wait for something later, but I just did not want to be bothered. Now, why are there so many Jiggies that are able to be skipped? Who knows? Did Rare feel like 6 was too little and 20 was their way of being more forgiving and lenient? Or did Rare feel that too many Jiggies in this game might have stumped players, and so they left a wider margin of error that you could figure out to get to the end of the game? A new addition in regards to the list of Jiggy objectives is that each world now has one Jiggy tied to a boss fight, considering that the first game had, none. I was happy to see that more of an effort was made to include them here. The bosses are fun and they get increasingly harder as you progress. The designs are also really creative and it fits the world that you're in. For example, in Pterodactyl Land you fight a giant pterodactyl named Terry, and in Grunty Industries you fight Wielder, a giant blowtorch. The bosses provide more personality to the worlds themselves in this regard. And of course there's the final battle with Grunty herself, which is just as challenging as the last game. This time, like I said, she takes shelter in the Hag 1 tank, which you've essentially been chasing all game. The fight is broken up into phases like the last one, though thankfully there's no falling off the tower by accident, nor are there flight sections to deal with. The fight even gives the player the chance to make it easier. After each phase, Grunty will pop out and ask more quiz questions, and if you get them right, she attacks slower and gives you more time to hit her. The one slightly negative to this thing is how you actually damage Grunty. Since she's inside the tank, you have to wait till she sticks her head out at the top, and then in first person mode, fire eggs at her. I didn't mention it earlier, but now Kazooie has an aiming reticle when firing eggs. However, it's a tad twitchy. It doesn't cause any real issues during the game itself, but since now you have to be kind of precise, it can start to wear on you. However, I will flat out admit that this is probably, again, a me issue because I suck at precise shooting in first person. Twitch controls aside, the issue never spoiled the fight for me, and I felt as though this was a worthy successor to the fight from the first game. The presentation is once again one of the strongest points for the game as a whole. Like the first game, you can play Banjo-Tooie on the Xbox Live Arcade or Rare Replay, in addition to the N64. And on the ported version, the textures have been enhanced, and everything is bright, sharp, colorful, and vibrant. Each level has its own unique style and design, and nothing feels like it was repeated or reused. Grant Kirkhope's score is once again firing on all cylinders. To fit the more morbid and darker setting of the sequel, the music is a tad less whimsical in spots than the first, but there's still a few catchy earworms to be found. I was particularly fond of the theme to Witchy World, which invokes the feeling of a creepy amusement park carnival. Jolly Roger's Lagoon, which makes me feel like I'm in a pirate town. The overworld theme was also pretty good, and it keeps changing, much like in Grunty's lair in the first game as you move around. In addition, I liked the Jinjo village theme. That was always catchy. So overall, how do I feel about this game? I'm not gonna lie, I was really hesitant to make this video. I knew I had mixed feelings that don't line up with a lot of other opinions about this entry in the series. So before I wrap this all up, I will stress again, this is my opinion, and hopefully I've given you an example of the things that make me aggravated with this game. And again, if you love this game, if you beat it 100% with no guides and no issues, no mess back in the day when it came out or years after the fact, I respect your opinion to have, and I do not think you are wrong. This review, like all my reviews, is to state how I feel about a game. I'm not here to beat you all with a stick over the head until you agree with me. So with that said, this is my final say on Banjo-Tooie. I think Banjo-Tooie is an ambitious sequel that has some great moments, ideas, and plot devices that are hurt only by the choices of design, which I feel are repercussions of trying to make the game bigger and more connected than that of the first. I love the story. The idea of making a darker sequel and killing the characters off and having more of a morose theme is a great avenue for a sequel to take. I think the level themes are really creative, and the new characters are funny and cool and fit the world naturally. I love some of the new moves, and the mechanic of splitting Banjo and Kazooie up, and in turn giving them their own set of abilities, is a natural progression of the design from the first game. It's just the damn size of these levels and the overusage of backtracking that kills it for me, and will always make me choose the first game to replay over this. The fact that in each level I had to spend an hour or more to make progress because so many triggers to obtain Jiggies are off in another world or require a move I just don't have, cut me to my core to the point where I was just dreading going in to play the game again to record. I never like using guides for games unless it's like for collectibles, not main objectives. I applaud Rare for trying to make a huge connected world after the solitary worlds of the first game, but holy hell did they overdo it. Had the game only used a few Jiggies across all levels that required something from a later level, or a move that was found somewhere else, maybe I wouldn't have minded so much. But the way it stands with the large worlds and the multiple areas in them, combined with the fact that some of the Jiggies in each world require heavy backtracking, just ruins the experience for me. My relationship with this game is not like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. The first time I tried playing it, I felt annoyed by the new design. I would tell myself, but Chris, you loved the first game, you can't hate Banjo-Tooie. And then years later, when I was playing the game again, when it was re-released, I told myself that now that I was older, I probably would like it, because I was a stupid kid and I didn't have the ability to figure out where the Jiggies were. But again, I booted it up and still got frustrated and annoyed and slowly stopped playing. And over and over and over again this would happen. So in a way, I'm glad I made this review since it got me to really question why I've never been able to finish it. So, can I recommend Banjo-Tooie to you? Well, yes, I think I still can, because Banjo-Tooie is not a bad game. when you get down to the core of what's here, there's a lot of stuff that it's doing right than what it's doing, what I think is wrong. And I think how much enjoyment you'll get out of that will depend on whether you can deal with the backtracking and the level layouts. Some people might like going around, exploring every nook and cranny, trying to put it all together, and some people have far more better photographic memories than I do. Personally, I think that's starting to deteriorate with my age, but that's another story for another day. And so ends the series of Banjo-Kazooie reviews. I know I mentioned Grunty's Revenge on the GBA, but like I said, the fanbase wasn't too thrilled, and I only played it, I think, on an emulator, but I never really gave it a full playthrough, so I can't really speak one way or the other. The camera setup, from what I've seen in pictures, just seems weird and would give me a headache. I will say that it was impressive to see the Banjo-Kazooie format ported to the small screen, but I don't think this game is anything to write home about. So like I said, that's it! Wait, what? What? Oh yeah, there was Banjo Pilot for the GBA too. I know, it seems weird, Banjo getting a racing game, but in reality, that game was supposed to be Diddy Kong Pilot. But see, that game was made during the time in which Mommy Nintendo was selling little baby Rare off to Microsoft, and so Rare lost all the rights to use their characters, and so Diddy Kong had to go bye-bye, in addition to everything else they had planned for that game. So yeah, Banjo Pilot. I never played it myself, but I've seen footage of that too, and it looks, decent. Nothing too special from the look of it, though. And yeah, that's it, because there are no more Banjo-Kazooie games. Because we never got Banjo 3. It's a sad end for the series, because I think the franchise was just getting started, and a third game, I feel, could have been something really special. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next review. Goodbye. And fade out. Come on, fade out. Come on, I've been yapping for like, what is it? Like 30 minutes, and that's with mistakes, so that's like, what, 25? People, it's over. It's done. I'm not doing it. I'm not saying what you want me to say, because I pretend very hard that what you want me to say doesn't exist. I don't know what you're talking about, because I didn't wait 8 years to be let down by anything. I just wanted Banjo 3. You know, a traditional Banjo-Kazooie platformer with all the moves that I had amassed over 2 games. You know, a game with humor, charm, and an interesting plot, and maybe a little less backtracking than what this game gave me, but, you know, something similar. What I didn't want, nor asked for, or ever want in my life, was a soulless non-platformer with vehicle building, and a plot that seems to be content with making fun of the 2 games that came before it in an effort to seem cool and hip with the modern gaming aesthetic. Okay, fine. Come back next time when we look at Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Really, they should have just called it Banjo-Kazooie Lego Simulator, because that's really what it is!